This is Stand Up for the Truth, addressing important issues and topics affecting Christians across the nation.
Thursday, May 16, 2024. I'm Crash Connell. It is a brand new podcast today. Mary Danielsen at the host mic. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to all of our listeners on this Thursday. My guest today is Wisconsin State Senator, 1st District, and Andre Jacque. And whether you are from our fair state or not, we are going to be looking at some issues that everyone grapples with across the fruited plain. We are just a 50th of the nation, but it's interesting that so many governments, states, people, local level, state level, are grappling with the same things. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, an opportunity to connect with a Wisconsin public servant. But as usual, we are going to open with a scripture, and I have Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. And it says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God." That indeed is good news. Let's pray this morning. Would you pray with me? Oh, Lord, we do look to you as the author and finisher of our faith, and we thank you for that perfect sacrifice, accomplishing for us what we could not do for ourselves, Lord. Help us to walk in a manner worthy of such great love and sacrifice. And we lift up Andre Jacque to you and ask for your direction in his life, for wisdom and grace to do the job of public servant, for good health for him. We lift up his family, for good health for them too, Lord. And we thank you for the work that he is doing on our behalf. In Jesus' name, amen. Senator Andre Jacque, he's a full-time legislator. He has served on so many councils. He's been so active in Wisconsin. It would probably take all day to list them all, but I do want to list a few of the things that he has done and councils he's served on. He's a recipient of the Wisconsin Coalition Against Domestic Violence Legislative Champion Award, Wisconsin Counties Association Outstanding Legislator Award, Pro-Life Wisconsin Legislator of the Year, NFIB Guardian of Small Business Award, Wisconsin Family Council William Wilberforce Freedom Award, Wisconsin Coalition of Virtual School Family Shining Star of Education Reform, Dairy Business Association Legislative Excellence Award, Distinguished Young Conservative Leader of the Year, Green Bay Area Chamber of Commerce Legislator of the Year, Mothers Against Drunk Driving Legislator of the Year, Wisconsin Professional Police Association Law Enforcement Honor Roll, and that's just a sampling, but it gives the listener an idea of his heart for the people of Wisconsin. Senator Jacque, Andre, welcome to Stand Up for the Truth.
Thank you, Mary. It's an honor to be back.
Good to have you here. Now, you were elected to the State Assembly first. You served there, and now the State Senate. Can you give us an idea? What is your political history in Wisconsin? What were the years that you served in those ways?
Sure. So I was elected to the Wisconsin State Assembly in fall of 2010 and was elected to the State Senate in the fall of 2018, and am running now for the open seat for the 8th Congressional District.
Yes.
But have been very active legislatively in the time that I have, because not going to be doing this forever, but been very blessed by, my wife has obviously been very supportive for me to be able to do the work that I do, and it's something that I want to be able to look myself in the mirror every day and know that I've done everything that I can to be true to my faith and values, and to get as much done as I possibly can in the time that I have.
Conscientious politicians, where are they all? Now, let's start with that announcement that you made in March, running for Congress. This is the seat left open by the retirement of Mike Gallagher. This is the 8th Congressional District. What goes into such a decision? And you alluded to the fact that it takes a whole family to do what you do. Absolutely. You need that support. So, what goes into that decision? And I guess, where is the district, too, geographically? Let's tackle those things.
Yeah, so the 8th Congressional District is essentially northeast Wisconsin.
Okay.
And I represent about half of the district right now in terms of my state Senate district. And certainly was not something that I was anticipating in terms of the announcement by the then incumbent that he was not going to be running again. Since then, he actually resigned early from the seat. But it is something that I had a number of folks immediately reaching out to me asking me to consider running. And it was something that I prayed a lot about. Honestly, certainly my wife said that she thought that I needed to run, and that certainly weighed heavily as well. But there were a number of things that would have been obstacles to running, and I just prayed for clarity. And one by one, those obstacles were removed, and I continued to get a lot of encouragement to run from people that I think very highly of. And so I think it really is critical that when you have a conservative seat like this one, that you don't just fill it with somebody with an R after their name, that it be somebody who actually is going to make sure that we deliver on the promises and the platform that we put forward. And that's really my goal, is to make sure that we are standing true to the people of the 8th District, as opposed to being beholden to special interests or party bosses. And that was really a concern with what the other options were in the race at that point. So.
Who else is running for that seat? And the Democrats are going to mount a challenge, I would imagine, too. So who else will be running for that seat that you're aware of at this point?
Yeah, there's Roger Roth, a former state senator who I had served with. But again, he was actually jumped into the race on the day that the incumbent announced that he was not running again. So, again, folks, I think, really wanted to make sure that there was a more conservative alternative. And then more recently, there's a gentleman named Tony Weed who is running. And honestly, don't know a lot about him. He used to own a few gas stations. But I had knocked on his door a couple years ago when he was in the new part of my state Senate district. He put up one of my signs, but he otherwise has not really been involved, in political issues or causes. So I guess still to be determined where some things are there. And then the Democrats actually have put forward one candidate. They made it very clear that they are clearing the field for Kristen Lyerly, who had run previously for state assembly, had not won, but she has been kind of at the forefront of some of the political discussions surrounding abortion, because she is the abortion provider for Planned Parenthood in Sheboygan. And I have had some run-ins with her down in Madison. She has testified against my legislation. I think one of the more interesting things about Dr. Lyerly is that I had actually asked her during a Senate committee hearing about whether I had asked for clarification. I thought that she was an abortion provider based on, again, some of her previous conversations when she had come to the Capitol. And this is on Wisconsin Eye, she said, "I do not provide abortions." And then just a few months later, Planned Parenthood put out all these ads praising her as this great abortion provider when she was running for that assembly seat. And so I still haven't gotten a good explanation as to how that all unfolded.
You might be waiting a while. Now, Gallagher is gone already. Is that correct? I mean, and there's this slim majority. What happens between now and November? Because this won't be decided until November. So now where are we at?
So it was actually just earlier this week, Tuesday actually, where the governor called a special election that is going to be concurrent with the fall general election, which we knew was going to be the case in terms of being able to fill the seat after the November election. It was not known that it was going to require an actual separate election. I think that still is legally dubious, but it is something where now I have an extra 1,000 nomination signatures to gather in 2 weeks' time here. But and maybe that was it is creating a little extra chaos, I suppose, for the race. But we had already gathered over the 1,000 that we needed for getting on the ballot for the regular fall elections. So it's you always want to have an extra margin for ones that could be disqualified.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, you got a busy summer ahead of you. There's no question about that. Now, when you made this announcement recently, you talked about your bona fides as a conservative, opposition to abortion. So it says your political identity kind of formed around the pro-life issues, and then also the situation at the border, which is an existential threat, and then sanctuary cities. I mean, there's so many things coming at us on all sides. So pro-life, if this is your political identity, and I do want to talk about that border wall. It's affecting all of us, and we tend to think up here in the north that this is something that the southern states are dealing with, or maybe New York or Minneapolis. Well, that's pretty far north, isn't it? How is this affecting Wisconsin at this point, and how do you see this playing out? This is a hot issue, and it should be a hot issue. It's actually an absolute mess. So, what are your thoughts on border wall, sanctuary cities, that entire thing, and the entire situation as we know it?
Yeah, I think that if we had the border wall already constructed, obviously the situation at the southern border would be very different. I mean, unfortunately, we've effectively handed control to the cartels in Mexico for who gets to go across. And when you look at the drugs, the human trafficking, sex trafficking, when you look at the criminal element that are basically unvetted that are streaming into the country, it's a huge problem. And I think it's just critical that we set up as many safeguards as possible to try to have people go through the legal process, to try to have some order. If you have legitimate asylum seekers, that you actually have, rather than just releasing people into the country. I mean, the Remain in Mexico policy certainly worked from an orderliness perspective, but I think the situation that we have right now with public safety in our cities, that really throughout our country, it's just a huge issue when you have people without legal status that then are really incentivized to continue to operate outside of our legal system. And that has, again, been really manipulated and capitalized on by organized crime.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the voter ID situation, driver's licenses. How are we dealing with that in Wisconsin? What currently is are they allowed to get as far as legal documents and that sort of thing? Voter IDs, where are we at with that in Wisconsin?
Yeah, and I think that certainly there are requirements, whether you're talking about the real IDs or to register to vote. You're supposed to affirm that you are a U.S. citizen, that you are eligible to vote. I think, unfortunately, you have had efforts by various groups to encourage people to either deliberately violate the law or look past that in terms of registering or voting when they're not supposed to. And especially when you have that language barrier, and that is something where because we don't have an official language for government use, it is something that we've enabled people to unfortunately. It's not. We have any number of statistics that back up that when you don't learn the language, you are going to have fewer economic possibilities, but it's going to present any number of obstacles to interacting in daily life. But there are some states, some cities that have chosen to allow for non-citizens to vote in local elections. We're seeking to put an end to that. That'll be actually on the fall ballot here in Wisconsin.
Wow. Okay. And I think most people feel that if they're going to come in and work, go through the process to become a citizen, that's one thing. I think the crime element is what really scares a lot of people. Sanctuary cities, are there any in Wisconsin?
You really have had, I think both Milwaukee and Madison declare themselves to be that to a certain extent. I mean, their county boards of supervisors have essentially passed ordinances where law enforcement is not able to ask when you have violent crimes that have been committed what somebody's legal residence status is, and that, I mean, when you have individuals who kind of continue to circle through the legal system, we know that just for instance, with Haiti and the unrest there, they were emptying out the prisons, and it is something where when you are sending folks that might have any number of mental health issues or other drug or substance abuse issues, and letting them loose into our communities in a situation where they're looking for resources, and how do they get them? Well, potentially, again, they're at the liberty of those that are pushing people to steal and whatever else. But when you have essentially, we've had a number of high-profile cases in our country where, individuals who have committed very serious crimes and gone on to commit more crimes because they can't be touched in the sanctuary cities that they reside.
That's a mess. It really is a mess. I thought it was refreshing this week to learn that Panama has a new president, and he's cutting off the flow of immigrants out of his country to this country. And I thought, wow, somebody from another country is actually taking their authority seriously and saying that's enough, because there are no, wherever the people are coming from, various nations south of us, the leadership doesn't do anything. And this gentleman says, no, that's we're done with that. So I thought that was a kind of a refreshing thing. I forgot to mention to you, or I wanted to ask you earlier on in the program about the redistricting maps. Now, this is something I have tried to wrap my head around. I've talked to Julian Appling, Wisconsin Family Council, about it, and I admit, I don't understand what is happening on the front of redistricting. Where are we at with that? Where is Tony Evers at with that? It kind of makes my head explode when I read the various articles about it. Like, who is doing what?
It is a very confusing situation. So we just had redistricting 2 years ago. We had maps that were, they went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court and were deemed constitutional. However, so we ran elections under the new maps in 2022, but since that point we had a state Supreme Court election, which flipped the balance of the court from conservative to liberal, and there was the indication, obviously, in conducting that election that the person who won more or less was inviting a lawsuit to flip the results of the previous redistricting case. And so that's ultimately what happened. It was actually filed on the day that she was sworn in as a Supreme Court justice, and they expedited that case to make it clear that they were going to be looking to draw new lines. Now, I think there was a very strong due process argument that this had already been decided, that you can't essentially decide cases with the same facts based on just who is hearing them in that short of a time frame. Okay. So I do think that we had a very strong basis to be able to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, depending on when that case would have been issued by the state Supreme Court. I think ultimately there were maps that were adopted by the legislature, which I did not vote for, but they were identical to the maps that Governor Tony Evers had requested. Okay. And, of course, they were requested to create maximum political advantage for the Democratic Party. So they placed a lot of Republicans together in seats. I was actually placed into a seat with two other state senators here in northeast Wisconsin. So while I still am able to serve my constituents from the 1st Senate District, I would have to move to be able to run again, which would be obviously a hardship on myself or anyone in the current real estate market and circumstances. So that was similarly applied in any number of other assembly seats and Senate seats where you have either Republican incumbents paired against each other, and of course magically no Democrats are in a situation of having to run against each other right now. And so, again, I think that I would have preferred if we would have fought that all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court rather than capitulated to Governor Evers' maps. I guess there was a thought that somehow one of the other maps might have been somehow worse for Republicans, but they think they were all pretty awful.
That's interesting because it never occurred to me necessarily that it really would upend a lot of people's lives, such as yours, to be in a different district and to serve a different district. Yeah, politics. Yeah, that's one of those things that, it's just part of the process. You also talk about one of your first priorities in Congress would be to restrain the administrative state. You'd like to take aim at ESG, environmental, social, and corporate governance programs. I presume this is wokeism.
Yes, it is wokeism. Wokeism obviously takes a lot of different forms.
It does.
ESG is sometimes lumped in with what's called the Great Reset, or kind of some of the globalism and the push toward kind of liberal and progressive values that need to be mandated and enforced on not just government, but then also the private sector as well. And so, yeah, I have proposed legislation to be able to basically rein that in, to keep that from being utilized the way that it has been pushed by Governor Evers and others. Obviously, we've seen in the UW system. I've been also involved in legislation kind of regarding critical race theory or any other sort of ideology that is being foisted upon our youth to indoctrinate that you are less than because of your race or gender, or that there's somehow some inherent superiority or inferiority on the basis of those intrinsic factors. And but yes, there's certainly been an effort in terms of within government contracts or programs, or to be able to insist that you have. I mean, we kind of saw an element of it in these recent campus protests regarding Hamas and Palestinian Authority, in terms of their insistence that there be a divestment from Israel.
Right.
That is sort of one of the demands that can be incorporated within when they call it, ESG stands for environmental and social governance. So the social aspect of that is basically anything that a liberal wouldn't want, they can basically say is a negative social aspect.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I've been involved in some human trafficking legislation where we're seeking to help faith-based groups that help to get women out of the life and provide support, and and just in a lot of different areas where the value of people from a faith-based perspective, providing direct assistance to people in their communities, and it's done without judgment. It's just done on a very charitable basis. But there are unfortunately those on the other side of the political aisle from me that would like to essentially open up those groups for lawsuits or disqualify them from being able to provide certain assistance on the basis of Christian religious beliefs, essentially. Okay. And I think that's very, very unfortunate that continues to be an emphasis placed by some of my colleagues, because I've seen it play out directly on the Senate floor and in the committee level as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then there's DEI, which is a close relative of ESG, diversity, equity, inclusion. And a lot of, that is in the banking system. We've seen bank closures. We've seen banks cancel people, say, well, we don't agree with you on this or that. So the wokeism is just is destroying civilization. It really, really is, because now a few people, we started with political correct speech. We started with, you can't say that, it's not PC. And it's just devolved to this. A lot of businesses are fed up with it. It's not working for them. They're losing money due to all these regulations. So I applaud that you want to take on ESG. And I have from February, this is about human trafficking, Senator Jacque's Human Trafficking Victim Support Legislation clears Senate committee. You are the co-author of a bill. And you talk about the major concern of human trafficking in Wisconsin, which is absolutely true. It says this initiative will help fill a vital role in building capacity to serve victims of sex trafficking by establishing a pilot program that will provide 50% matching funds up to $2.5 million over 2 years to assist victim support organizations in providing critical care services, food, job training, and housing. It's really sad that we have to talk about this, but in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Madison, the whole I-94 corridor up to Minnesota, I understand this is one of the worst places in the country for human trafficking. Wow, I mean, it's just so surprising to me.
Yeah, going back to, I had worked for the city of Green Bay, and I remember talking with our Green Bay police chief back then when he was telling me that, Wisconsin, was, and Milwaukee even more specifically, was the sex trafficking capital of the Midwest. Wow. And, I mean, part of that is, you say, well, gee, why not Chicago? Why not Minneapolis? Well, it's because of where we're located along the interstates. It's a jumping off point to, and that's why, I mean, human trafficking really is an issue in every county in our state. Every area of our state has had these issues, and it's because it's mobile. It's because you have pimps that basically move women around freely, whether that is to sexually oriented establishments, strip clubs, escort services, but the back channels of the internet, and you got the massage parlors too, and everything else. But unfortunately, it's and just the impact that it has on people's lives, and that's actually legislation that I've been involved with for a number of years, and I've gotten it through one chamber or the other a number of times, but deals with increasing penalties for those that are driving that demand, that are essentially purchasing sex and using those funds to basically pay for the law enforcement efforts, but also an equal amount that is split to being able to assist building that capacity and for victim services. And again, there was supplemental legislation that was just in terms of providing additional funding for victim services, but there's a lot of different things that can be done for human trafficking, and we haven't certainly gotten all the way there yet. But it's a huge issue, and of course, drug trafficking and a lot of other issues go hand in hand.
And we have our own Tara Rose here. She is involved in Damascus Road Project, Inc. out of Oshkosh. And so she is doing her part to come alongside victims and to educate the public on and the church on what to look out for. It's just insidious. It's all over the state. Sad to say, but I'm grateful that you're looking into that and helping to facilitate legislation to that end. Boy, we only have a minute or so left in this half. I do want to talk about the Israel protesters, and we can start this and then we'll pick it up again. As far as Wisconsin goes, UW-Madison, Milwaukee, is there a lot going on? I know there are only 2 states in the union that don't have these protesters at various universities. Wisconsin?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly Madison and Milwaukee have had the most significant protests. Actually, there's some violence in Madison in terms of the intimidation of students and really law enforcement seeking to just again follow local ordinances, state law in clearing some of these encampments. You have actual UW faculty that were involved in stopping that, and just so many kind of reprehensible actions that were being taken against Jewish students, against those that were trying to just have adherence to, again, longstanding UW policies that were not being evenly enforced, and really cutting people out of the table when some of these decisions were being made. Obviously, as part of the decision that was made at UW-Milwaukee, and I was actually part of. I circulated a letter among my colleagues to make a point to the UW in terms of these were the very reasonable requests made by students to make sure that there wasn't going to be adverse action in terms of classes and grades and that sort of thing. But instead, they were successful in getting divestment from Israeli companies.
Okay. Very interesting. We have so many topics, a very eclectic mix of topics here. I'm speaking to Andre Jacque, State Senator in Wisconsin. My name is Mary Danielsen. You're listening to Stand Up for the Truth. We will be back in 2 minutes with more with Senator Jacque. Stay with us.
The sun may be shining right now in Wisconsin, but now until July, inside the Resch Center, it's blizzard season.
Handoff to Terrence Smith to the goal line. Touchdown, Green Bay.
The Green Bay Blizzard are an indoor football team that plays in the IFL and are now excited to become a business underwriter of the Q90FM ministry.
Loading up and throwing deep, and this ball is caught for a touchdown.
Game schedules and more information can be found at greenbayblizzard.com. Green Bay Blizzard, supporting Q90FM. Q90FM presents the Police Lights of Christmas, helping over 70 police departments across Wisconsin.
Each department is going to leave this night with a box full of thousands of dollars worth of gift cards.
Visit lightsofchristmas.us. Police Lights of Christmas, a ministry of Q90FM.
Feedback, questions, and topic suggestions are always appreciated. Email us at comments@standupforthetruth.com.
Welcome back to Stand Up for the Truth for May the 16th. It's a Thursday. May is a little over half over. It's just kind of amazing to me how time flies like that. We are speaking to State Senator of Wisconsin, Andre Jacque, this morning, and we have so many topics that we've been looking at, I think, that affect a lot of people around the country in various ways. I want to talk about some of the topics that have been addressed in the legislature this season, Andre, but also election integrity. And I know that's on a lot of people's minds, considering how things have gone. There's just so much debate about ballots and ballot boxes and all this sort of thing. What are some of the things Wisconsin is looking at as far as maintaining election integrity?
Yeah, I think it's a very serious concern when you look at the things that have occurred, not just in Madison and Milwaukee, where we've always known that there have been issues and kind of rogue clerks, but in Green Bay more recently, there have been a number of issues where we've kind of consistently seen that our election procedures are not being followed regarding the counting of ballots. I mean, you had an out-of-state individual who was basically given the keys literally to the counting room and running our central count operations. You had the city of Green Bay shutting down, basically almost all of the polling locations in the city and denying assistance from the National Guard to make it more difficult for people to vote in person. I think that you've seen, and again, one of the significant concerns in terms of a temptation for fraud, we do have same-day voter registration. And, of course, one of the problems, though, is when you have individuals that are able to cast a ballot, and then we find out that they were not legal residents. And so in Green Bay in particular, we've had issues with the postcards that get mailed out following the election that bounce back. And, when you have had, especially at the local level, some races decided by relatively small margins, and there's not been the legal duty followed by the clerk in terms of requiring reports to the district attorney to let them know, hey, there are some individuals that may have cast a ballot that nobody's been looking into it because there's been no notifications. So I've obviously worked a lot on election integrity. Have put forward a number of bills related to cleaning up our voter rolls in terms of making sure that we are making sure that people have legal status to vote. But when you look at not just indefinitely confined, but apparently there is an entire ward of comatose individuals at a nursing home in the Green Bay area, 20-plus people that have had a perfect voting record in the last 10 years when they've been unconscious. And directly, asked by the city clerk to make sure that they are voted, even though there's no way they possibly could have, competently done so. So there's that is certainly another area that differentiates myself from my opponents is that I have pushed on this issue and many others. I've not been afraid to engage in a lot of areas simply because the only limitation is my own effort and willingness that I'm willing to put in, and I do think it's critical that, we have, unfortunately right now in Wisconsin, Megan Wolf as the WEC administrator, who is there as the result of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin and I guess really Speaker Robin Voss in terms of not allowing for a vote to come forward for her removal. The Senate has certainly indicated that it would vote for her removal if it were given that opportunity by the Assembly. But that's a huge issue when you have the chief elections official who's supposed to be in charge of calling balls and strikes for clerks throughout the state of Wisconsin, giving out guidance, or at least reining people in when they go astray, and they know that they're beholden to a particular political party or individual. When there were questions that arose about the special election that was just called, there was a reporter that had called WEC and then emailed them and was basically told, go to the governor's office for guidance. That's not the way that it should work. Right. It should be something where, we have the clear guidance of what a Wisconsin election law should be, and right. As opposed to deferring to kind of partisan actors, and that's
this is not a partisan issue. That's just what I was thinking when you were saying all that, and we're not the only state who's grappled with this, and I've never seen so much gaslighting as I have about this, to the point where we can't even have a discussion without name calling. Well, if you think elections were tampered with, then you're a crazy right-wing conspiracy theorist. Across the board, there hasn't really been any adult conversations. Well, there have been some, I'm sure. But what we get in the media is there are no adults coming to the table and talking about this. This is a big deal. This is a huge deal.
Yeah, and actually two of the issues that I was involved in that were signed into law this session, one was kind of directly dealing with what we saw in Green Bay, where you had those polling locations closed with no input, without going through the governing body. Wow. That is something that now it has to follow a different process, and that could not occur through something that I had authored, as well as clerk whistleblower protections. Unfortunately, what we saw is that the Green Bay City Clerk previously had actually left her position, now works for a different municipality, because of basically being forced by the mayor to try to accept felons involved in the voter registration and conducting the actual voting process, and handing over essentially complete control of election procedures to an out-of-state, politically aligned special interest group. And so it is important that we continue to look at what we can do to improve election integrity, because there's a lot of questions that, again, I think are just being shut down from being really looked at. Because I had a bill this session as well, where all it was taking were the recommendations of the Legislative Audit Bureau, a very nonpartisan entity, and it was basically simply, making sure that we were cleaning up a lot of election procedures. Again, the Legislative Audit Bureau has never been questioned by either party before, and yet Governor Evers still vetoed that bill. And hopefully the Assembly will attempt an override, because they would have to take the first step. But that's unfortunately the point that we're at, and that even independent third parties cannot suggest recommendations, and we can't get them through the Democratic governor.
Well, election years are tough enough with not being able to necessarily even trust the media, but this adds a layer of cynicism. I think it adds a layer, people think, well, why should I even vote then? I think it makes people more cynical about the process if they can't even trust the outcome. And you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube based on what happened last time, 2020. So I think this is, for that reason alone, it's going to cause a lot of people to just sort of give up on the whole process. But you got to keep fighting the good fight when it comes to election integrity. I want to talk also about limiting access by minors to obscene and sexually explicit materials. Now, you've had a hand in some legislation. I want to ask you about that. Does this have to do with librarians having to tell parents what the children. The fact that we have to have this conversation is crazy. I remember what was in the library when I was a kiddo, and it was Little House on the Prairie,
Yeah.
right? And mystery stories and nonfiction, good nonfiction. Or is it about making librarians liable? Of course, the Dems are going to squeal censorship no matter what you do here. What is the solution? Is there a solution? This must be sort of a hard row to hoe, too, because of that knee-jerk censorship reaction. How can we limit access by minors to some of these really obscene materials? And to me, that goes against obscenity laws. To me, that's a simple thing, but it's not simple these days.
Yeah, and so I think basically what it gets down to is that, we do have obscenity laws. We do have limitations on sexually explicit materials. And what this is doing is basically saying that you are not going to be exempt solely because of your position as whether as a teacher or as a librarian. And I actually have kind of a unique perspective on this among legislators, just because my mom was both. My mom was a French teacher. That's how I got the name Andre, and she was also a librarian, and both public and private schools. And she's told me just how different the sort of materials are now that are trying to be foisted on youth. And unfortunately, our Department of Public Instruction has put them on this kind of approved list. But when you look at the sexually explicit, not just illustrations, but directions to children in terms of how to, for instance, access sex apps, and to just things that are just unbelievably inappropriate. And would be considered grooming behavior, or if it was a janitor, you wouldn't allow it, but yet somehow, if it's somebody else, putting forward materials again without any parental knowledge, that's a significant concern. Now there was one change that was made in relation to. You have this nude bike ride in Madison.
Yeah, right.
Was,
I remember that. Yeah.
But no, it just is. It's amazing the challenges that our culture has created today for children and families to have to wade through, and I just think it is important to limit what our taxpayer dollars are. Subsidizing in terms of materials that are being purchased and provided, and what again with our public dollars we are making available in terms of essentially pornography.
Yeah, it is, and also tearing down these walls of children naturally have these walls. I think as far as when it comes to pornography and things like that, and we're tearing down those walls of modesty and such, and at such a young age. We're actually destroying their souls in a lot of ways. And so this is a very serious thing. So we appreciate anything that is being done for that. Also, pro-life legislation. I want to get that in before we're done here. Prohibiting taxpayer abortion subsidies. You worked with another state representative, is that correct, on introducing legislation, the Taxpayer Abortion Subsidy Prevention Act, to prohibit the use of public employees and public property for activities relating to abortion. What more can you tell us about that? I like that. This needs to be on the books. I think this is really important when it comes to public property and taxpayer money. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we've had arrangements between the University of Wisconsin and Planned Parenthood, where you have actually even at one point had the chief medical officer for Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin, their chief abortionist, who was actually a full-time UW employee who was basically loaned out by the UW to Planned Parenthood while they were spending half their time, half their UW salary, essentially performing abortions. But multiple other UW physicians, medical residents, things that certainly are not required by law, but have not been explicitly prohibited, unfortunately, and so the UW has fought the prohibitions that we have on the books. But you've also seen the state basically, at least various units of government in Wisconsin talk about supporting, whether that's right across state lines in Rockford, or selling or actually just leasing public facilities for providing abortion. But that is one thing that in the legislature I have removed funding for abortion providers, whether that is through the 340B program, through Medicaid, through Title X, through Title V, through state employee health plans. We've eliminated funding for elective abortion, and that's something that I'm very proud of. The Democrats have continued to put forward bills to eliminate the successful laws that I've passed. Well Woman program as well, that's one of the areas that even more of those subsidies exist at the federal level, and that's certainly one of the reasons why I would like to go to Congress is to continue my work at that level. But obviously, there's a lot of things that and very pleased to have already been endorsed by Pro-Life Wisconsin, the sole endorsement in this race. Abby Johnson. Actually, some listeners will be familiar with Ben Calhoun, the lead singer for Citizen Way.
Okay.
That's played on this station, but I know that he's more of a Christian solo artist, but very pro-life, and he's endorsed me as well. It is something where there are a lot of things that we can do in terms of providing support for adoption. Those were passed by the Senate. The Assembly did not take them up in terms of either the adoption process, which I've authored various reforms so that we are making it easier for women to make the life-affirming choice, but also support to adoption agencies and individuals adopting in terms of defraying some of the expenses. That's something that unfortunately has been blocked. Helping crisis pregnancy centers, something that I've been very involved in. I was actually kind of the original author of the Choose Life specialty license plates that you might see with the footprint on the roadways. There's certainly a lot of important things that we need to do to protect innocent life.
Well, it's one baby steps. I mean, no pun intended. Baby steps, really, one legislation at a time. And we always also encourage people to get involved in school boards. I think COVID was a big wake-up call for parents, and seeing what the school boards want to do and wanted to do, it was a big opportunity to push their own agenda. Now, as far as there's a big pandemic treaty they're talking about. That's on the global elite level. But also Wisconsin grappled with masks and mandates, and they're talking about disease X or what's the next pandemic. And we're all rolling our eyes because we don't trust the process in any way, shape, or form, or the people behind pushing for this unknown pandemic. Where are you at with immunization mandates, parental consent, all that sort of thing? I think we've all had experiences with COVID. How could we not, right? I think most people have had it. I had it probably twice. You had it, and has that changed? How has that changed your life? Because I think 2020 changed a lot of our lives and a lot of our perspectives on just about everything.
Yeah, well, I will say, at the point that I was in the hospital with COVID, I'm just very thankful for everyone's prayers. A lot of people ask how I'm doing, and I can tell you I'm doing better than ever. So at the point that I had gone into the hospital, I had been struggling. I had been recovering from thyroid cancer, and really was not able to quite figure out the right level of medication. I had half my thyroid removed, and I was also dealing with undiagnosed sleep apnea, but yet I knew I had it, but I was not able to receive any of the assistance even while I was in the hospital for that. And so it was something where, I was not, I was in kind of a weakened condition at that point, sure. And much higher energy level now than before. But, it's something where it hasn't changed at all my core beliefs. So I was the author both before and after of legislation to prohibit any sort of discrimination based on whether or not you have taken the simply because that's not the government's business, especially when you're talking about an individual risk that's being assumed if there is one in terms of whatever that would be. So, I actually received an award for that just last year from Wisconsin United for Freedom, and but I had the actual bills vetoed by Governor Evers. So unfortunately, we don't have those protections in place. Obviously, there are those that have put forward legislation from the Democratic Party to eliminate the requirements of parental notification and consent, whether that is for vaccination or for a host of other medical procedures. I mean, obviously, one of the things we've seen in schools, you just referenced school boards, there are some districts that do not want to let parents be informed of what their children are doing at school versus, whether that's being pushed to pick pronouns and other things of that nature, or, again, viewing sexual content through a human growth and development curriculum that in some cases has not gone through the approved, state statutory process. So, it's in terms of the next pandemic, one of the bills that I received hearings on in both the Assembly and the Senate this session deals with gain-of-function research. That's what, many individuals believe very strongly. That was what was going on at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and largely, is thought to be the cause of COVID-19, when you are basically looking to try to find ways to make viruses more deadly and more transmissible. Unfortunately, some of that research has also occurred here in the state of Wisconsin with bird flu. It's been extremely controversial, but there have been, outbreaks that the UW has had to essentially pay significant fines for, but just the potential catastrophic consequences of, creating a monster for no real valid scientific reason. There are any number of other legitimate ways to do research without, again, potentially weaponizing even further than what they are.
Well, we were waiting. I remember that in 2020, just Governor Evers kept kicking the can down the road as far as extending the emergency and masks. So another 15 days, another couple of weeks. And, I worked at a church at the time, and you can only have 10 people. And it was very, very disruptive. And we were waiting on the Wisconsin legislature to do something about this.
As was I. I think I was. I even went on the radio a few places. I have a few monthly radio shows where I was talking about, the Assembly needs to convene to rescind the executive order, because that really did end up being what the state Supreme Court was waiting on before we finally had the mandates come out of effect. But yeah, I had also authored the legislation to prevent the church closures and some of the other mandates that just had such a catastrophic effect on our communities.
Yeah, and things we're talking about also a couple articles this week about restaurant apocalypse, that a lot of restaurants and businesses have not recovered since 2020. People have not come back out. Now it's worse because there's less discretionary income. There's less. A lot of people love to eat out. The younger generation, I think, eats out more than say I would at this point in my life. But they're even rethinking what they want to do and what it talks about. I love the quality of life in Wisconsin. I think it's fantastic. I love Wisconsin. But everyone everywhere is dealing with inflation, and the cost of food is shocking. I read an article entitled Cost of Living Tipping Point. Cost of living, of course, has no way kept up with income. Americans are struggling. It says that in 29 of 50 states, it will cost a household $150,000 a year to continue to live the American dream. Of course, in California, it's $100,000 more. How are things in Wisconsin? We don't have a lot of time left, but how are economics in Wisconsin? Besides the obvious that we are all struggling with things that are seemingly unsustainable at this point.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you look at the growth of government spending being unsustainable. And, when you are printing money at the federal level, because we can't do that at the state level. We've always had to to balance our budgets. And luckily, we've been able to find ways to try to invest in tax relief, and we've seen positive dividends, people coming into the state. Obviously things have been going differently in Illinois, and they've continued to have to increase taxes. Not have to, but because they have, it's chased people out of the state to our benefit. But one of the things that we tried to do in this most recent state budget was to give a significant tax break to families in that second tax bracket, basically $36,000 in household income up to $150,000, because that was the actual definition of middle class that Governor Evers used and still stood by, but he still vetoed middle class tax relief. And we also had married couple credit that we were looking to expand. There's also retirement that unfortunately we're not able to override the governor on.
Okay. Wow, our time is up. We've covered an awful lot of territory. You are a conscientious legislator, and we appreciate you. We're going to be watching that congressional race in the fall. Senator Andre Jacque from Wisconsin, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. God bless.
We are set for the day. Tomorrow, headline day, and therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. 1 Corinthians 15:58. Thank you so much to my guest. Have a great day on purpose.